Hey everyone, Matt here from Dr. Running, and today we are going to do a 50-mile review of the Adidas Supernova Prima 3. So this is Adidas's premium shoe within the Supernova lineup. You've got the Rise, which is the standard daily training shoe, the Solution, which is the stability shoe, which I don't know, has not come on sale in the US for some weird reason. It was a decent shoe. And then the Prima, which is the more premium of these three, supposed to be the more cushioned shoe, which in actuality, it's kind of a little bit different than that concept, and I'll explain why. I am enjoying this shoe for some unique reasons, but what I really want to do is go really quickly through this review on how's this shoe fit, how's it ride, all that kind of stuff, and get into the more unique things that are special to us at Doctors Running, talking about biomechanics, pathologies, things like that, and spend more time there. So hopefully I'll get through this stuff really quick, and I always say that and then take too long. I'm going to try to get through it correctly this time. So anyway, as always, the purpose of this review is to help you figure out, does this shoe work for you? And if it doesn't work for you, what things can you learn about this to apply to yourself in other ways? So as always, let's start off with specs in my men's size 10. So men's size 10, this shoe weight-wise in my measurements are coming in at 10.2 ounces or about 290 grams. The stack height is supposedly 38 millimeters in the heel, 30 in the forefoot for an 8 millimeter drop. That feels higher than that. There's a couple reasons why, but I will say, big fan of Run Repeat who do those own measurements, although the measurements come at the cost of cutting the shoe into pieces and you can't run it anymore. So they measured this as a 11 millimeter drop shoe. That is more what it feels like. And there are some factors here that make that feel also like that just without that measurement. So let's get into that in the ride. One of the biggest new things about this shoe is the Dream Strike Pro midsole. It is an ATPU foam. It is very responsive. It is very bouncy, but it's very firm. It's not a soft ride. There's not a lot of compliance, but there's a lot of resilience. In fact, enough that I've really enjoyed doing strides, shorter workouts like hill repeats, fartleks, getting over longer runs. It can feel a little bit harsh on my feet because the ride is quite stiff. And with that responsive ride, it does feel better landing a little bit farther forward. There is not much of a heel bevel. The Supernova series and Adidas typically has really good posterior lateral bevels. This one does not. It's kind of more centered, it's small, and there's more posterior flare, which makes it feel clunky, which makes that drop feel a little bit higher that we'll come back to in just a second. But it just also makes the transition a little clunky and a little harsh. It's not that bad. Harsh is an overly strong word, but thankfully the top layer pushes you forward really quick, but it works way better because the rocker really has been moved forwards. Some of the other models, there's been a lot more flexibility in the shoe. The rocker and the rear foot was more present. This shoe, much stiffer throughout, so not a lot of bending flexibility here torsionally or in the sagittal plane as well. And so the forefoot rocker is really prominent in the shoe. Not so much in the rear foot, more in the forefoot, so really rolls you forward. And fortunately, that stays really, like, there's a lot of structure here, and so that doesn't give. There is toe spring here, so be aware that, yes, sounds great, there's a forefoot rocker, it's gonna roll you forward. You know, if you have toe mobility problems, that may be good, but you have to realize there's toe spring, so your toes are held in extension, so if you can't handle a little mobility, that may not be the best option, but if you can handle some, the forefoot rocker is really good and really smooth off the toes. It's not so aggressive, you can't run a little quicker in it. This isn't the fastest shoe on the market, but this foam definitely gives it some versatility into running a little bit quicker, which is not the most common thing for certain daily traders, especially in the premium category. So ride, firmer, responsive, faster, does a little bit better with workouts than a lot of other premium trainers, but that comes at being firmer and stiffer. The other thing that's really nice about the sole is this shoe is definitely stable neutral. What Adidas claims that makes it this way is they got rid of the raw design they've had in the past and now do something called Drive Your Ride, which really is just supposedly a firmer bottom sole and the light traction, which I love this stuff. It is so durable and it actually gives good traction, which is really nice even in wet. But you'll notice, if you can see here, instead of having the raws the full length, they've got this kind of gap underneath here between the Drive Your Ride that moves and then opens in the forefoot. What I think they've learned from this is a lot of their super shoes, so the new Adios Pro 5, which I have not tested yet, but I really want to, and the Evo Pro 3 have kind of this energy rim. The plate is on the edge of the shoe instead of the center. And what that does is the stiffness is all on the outside, so it keeps you in the middle. So rather than being able to like fall off the shoe, that stiffness, you're gonna go the passive least resistance, so you'll stay in the middle of the shoe. I'm wondering if they've learned something from that, where this is gonna keep you, and this is noticeable, keeps you a little bit more on the lateral side, and then keeps you in the center here where this kind of encapsulates in the forefoot. More material on the medial side, more resistance here. Doesn't feel like a medially posted shoe, but the sidewalls that run the full length and just the stiffer ride do make this shoe quite stable. So if you want a shoe that will work for those with mild stability needs or guidance needs, this actually does really well. And it is lighter than and far more responsive than the Solution 3. This one comes in at 10.4 ounces or 290 grams. No, 294 to 295 grams. So if you want something a little lighter and definitely more bouncy, Prima 3 is going to be better. If you can find the Solution, it is definitely the more stable of the two because it's got the also called, I didn't realize it's called Guide Your Ride here, kind of the medial post-esque thing going on there. So more stable ride, firmer, more responsive, which is kind of a unique ride for a premium neutral training shoe, and then a rocker that's more in the forefoot, not as much in the heel. So those that land farther forward, want a more firmer, responsive ride, going to do better. The upper is also where this is unique. They use a full prime weave upper. It's very low volume and feels very snug throughout the length of the shoe. People with wide feet, there are no widths in this shoe. This is not going to work for you. It's really snug in the heel. There's a lot of padding back here, and the volume's so low in this shoe that even the forefoot, like on paper, is a little bit wider, more rounded. It's really low volume. So much, it felt slightly short, and in some people, if you may want to consider half size up, although I wouldn't do that with how stiff the shoe is and the rocker placement, I would go true to size, or I just wouldn't go with the shoe at all. If you have lower volume or narrow feet, this is going to work a lot better for you. What is interesting is the heel counter is so stiff, but it actually worked for me with the higher drop and the ton of padding didn't actually bother me that much because the heel counter only comes like 2/3 of the way up. The rest of it is more flexible upper here. So you won't get too much compression in the heel. I wish there was a little more notch here for the Achilles tendon, but it's actually done well for me because there's not many high heel drop shoes that are kind of firmer and more stable on the market like this. So it's really nice to have something that's more responsive. So those with Achilles tendon issues, this shoe is actually going to work well. Higher drop, firmer, not mushy, stable. This is going to work really, really well just because higher drop offloads the heel, not as much dorsiflexion they have to go through. The softness means you don't sink into the midsole. Instead, you're going to bounce and roll through it really quick. The forefoot rocker also. A forefoot rocker reduces some of the load on the plantar flexors, the muscles that push off, and on the plantar surface of the foot. So just know that it'll offload that during that transition. It actually feels really nice. It's been a great training shoe for the last couple of weeks when I flared up my Achilles because I was doing dumb stuff and training like 3 workouts in a row. Don't judge. The other thing that's really nice about this is the padding here. Again, despite the heel counter, if you got a little bit of insertional stuff there, it won't bother you as much, but be aware as this material starts to break down and compress, you are going to notice that heel counter a little bit more. So let's say, just be aware with your sensitivities how that's going to work. Now, Achilles tendon issues, it's going to work great based on those things. For those with patellar tendon issues, i.e. anterior knee issues, this is not going to work as well because it's the exact opposite where when you have a higher heel drop with a forefoot rocker, the higher drop shifts load away from the foot and ankle, so you don't need as much dorsiflexion, but your knee starts to go forward, and that's not a bad thing. It just means more load through the knee. When you have a forefoot rocker, that reduces load and work through your plantar flexors and increases it at the knee and the hip. What's nice though is because this is more stable, you're not going to have the instability that sometimes would make this worse, but the transition forward and the way that's going to go is going to put you in a more forward knee position, which can be good for some people. Others that have some sensitivities there early on, that may not be the best position because it may increase load in the patellar tendon. So probably better for those with Achilles tendon issues if you got that. Not as good for those with maybe patellar tendon issues. For those with hip stuff, what's really nice is because this is firmer and it's more stable, it's probably not going to bother you as much because people with a lot of those hip instabilities like piriformis syndrome, which really, we don't really know which one of the deep hip muscles that are truly irritated because there's actually 6 rotators, not including the piriformis. So it could be any one of those, but those tend to get really irritated with softer, unstable shoes. With a firmer, more responsive ride that's definitely stable, that's probably not going to be as much of an issue. So the big group to be aware of is those with knee issues. This may not work nearly as well unless your knee pain is coming because you have calves that are too stiff, which actually can be a different thing. Those with Achilles tendon issues, more hip issues, this is probably going to work a little bit better. Although just be aware, higher drop, forefoot rocker also puts stuff into the hip. So unique shoe because a lot of the shoes coming out now are pretty soft. Like there's not as many that are on the firmer end, and I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying that's something to be aware of with this shoe, but it is nice to have it be responsive. Not a lot of the Supernova line is responsive, and especially with the solution now getting much slower, where the first two versions were, it was a great lightweight stability shoe that you could run quicker in just because it was light. It wasn't the most responsive thing, but it was lighter, which is great. Solution 3, that kind of has gone away. Now it's just kind of the more traditional, like normal weight training shoe. The responsive, although not the lightest shoe, the responsiveness of the Prima might help it take that place in the stability kind of area. Even though it's not full stability shoe, it's stable enough to take that more stable shoe that can go a little bit quicker in the Supernova line. I would love to say that Adidas is going to bring back the tempo, but from what I hear, it's probably never going to happen. So this is probably the closest thing we're going to get to a little more responsive and stable shoe in that line, because a lot of the Adizero shoes typically have a huge midfoot cutout and don't typically tend to be as stable. Although, like we said, based on some of the things I've heard about the Adios Pro 5, maybe it'll be different. Who knows? Don't know that. But anyway, as always, I hope this stuff was helpful. Just some biomechanical things about this shoe. Again, just a reminder, it does fit really snug and narrow, so narrow feet are going to do better. Last thing I'm going to mention, lower volume if I have a higher instep. This is going to put a lot of pressure on your foot, so unless you loosen laces, which the tongue is quite compressive, by the way, which is great for security, not as great if you're sensitive there. Just be aware, very unique fit here, much more narrow. A lot of people complain, oh, shoes are getting wider toe box. Those with narrow feet, you got something that's special for you. Okay, so now, hope that was helpful. Please let me know in the comments if you've tried this shoe. It is really different than the last version, the last two versions. So I just want to know what you think. Do you agree or disagree with what I'm saying? And the reason I'm asking you that is because everybody has different perception of shoes. I enjoy putting this stuff out there. This is my experience with the shoe. My biomechanics are really unique. If you don't have similar biomechanics to me, really hard in your feet, more of a heel striker, although my mechanics are shifting a little bit as I've done some additional training and plyometrics and stuff like that, but pretty hard heel striker, need a heel bevel, you know, typically like more responsive shoes with a little bit of softness, you know, like a little more stability, like a little more forefoot width. If your mechanics are different than mine, you may have a different experience. You may experience the midsole differently. So really, please comment below, especially if you have a different experience, so that people coming here can go, hey, that guy's weird. Can I have a different opinion? Please go below and see that, because you might be able to help somebody find something, because the goal of this channel is not to sell you shoes. It's to educate you so you can make better decisions about what you put on your feet and don't get hurt, right? Shoes cannot prevent injuries, but they can contribute to one. So the goal, if you can learn more about your shoes, about your feet, your shoes, your body, hopefully it helps you learn more about what you put on your feet so you can have less injuries, better experiences, and just go out there and make this less complicated.